Welcome back to Point Blank, brought to you by Fitz Roofing. I'm Brandon Strange of Sports Map Houston. That's Joel Blank of ESPN 97.5, 92.5. While you're here, please hit subscribe on the channel. We do appreciate the support. Hey, Joel, welcome in. I definitely want to talk to you because this week, Adrian Wojnarowski reported that Ben Simmons is holding out in Philly. This is definitely what everyone's thinking. Wall wants out of Houston. Simmons wants out of Philly. Seems like a natural thing to happen here. But before we get into what a deal would look like to make that happen, I just want to ask you, is a team with Jalen Green, Kevin Porter Jr., and Christian Wood with Ben Simmons, are they automatically a playoff team in the West?
You know, the West is loaded, Brandon, so I'm not going to jump the gun and say that they're automatically a playoff team. But I would say that that's the building blocks of a starting lineup that they can compete at the bottom end of the Western Conference playoff picture, because you still got so many teams. Golden State is already loading up, and Utah and Denver and Lakers, Clippers, you know, and you can keep going from Dallas with Luka. So you look at all that and say, it's going to be a loaded Western Conference. So there's no guarantees, but I would think that they could possibly be in that range for the playoff play-in tournament, but it's definitely speeding up the rebuild process if it was possible.
Well, you mentioned that rebuild process. I want to dig more into what that means for the rebuild process. Before we do that, give us a word from Fitz Roofing.
We love Fitz Roofing because they take care of Houstonians. From a new roof on your business or your house to roof repairs to possibly home repairs or a new fence in your yard, they do that and so much more. Check them out at fitzroofing.com. Better yet, call them 832-521-3001. Free, no obligation inspection. They come to you and tell you what they can do. Doesn't cost you a thing, and it gives you a great idea and an estimate of what can be done. If you go to them, they're going to take care every step of the way. Fitz Roofing, making a difference, one home at a time.
So we mentioned this would be a gigantic decision for the Rockets because you would almost have to deal away some of that draft equity that they got back for Harden. So would a trade for Simmons essentially blow up the rebuild process right now?
I don't think so, Brandon, because I think Daryl Morey set the roof very, very high in what he wanted. It was a Deshaun Watson type deal. And Daryl always thinks he's smarter than everybody else in the room. But what everybody else knew that he wasn't willing to face was Ben Simmons was never going back to Philadelphia. And because you have to trade him, you lose the position of power from a bargaining chip standpoint as a general manager. Now you know he's not going to play for you. You got to get whatever you can. So it depends on what other offers are on the table, because the pressure on him to make them better and win. They already have to compete with the Bucks, the reigning champions, and the Nets, who almost were a toenail away from competing for a title in the Eastern Conference. In order to get better, you have to do things they don't have. You have to have a point guard. That's John Wall. You need more shooting. That's Eric Gordon. So I don't necessarily think they have to give up too much more draft pick wise, especially if Daryl gets desperate, because the contracts make sense. And from a Philadelphia perspective, in the short term, when Daryl needs to win, he's a better team with a veteran like Gordon coming off the bench and a true point guard like John Wall to get Embiid the ball. They have more talent on the short term to be better than they were a year ago. From a Rockets perspective, it obviously makes the sky the limit because you've got another big building block to throw into the mix with the young guys you have.
Remember when we were talking about Harden for Simmons just, a matter of months ago? And if Rafael Stone is able to end up trading Wall for Simmons and then put him alongside the number 2 pick in the draft and Jalen Green, you got to think a lot more of Stone and maybe a lot less of Daryl Morey, right?
Oh, no question about it. This is another one where Rafael Stone's under the microscope, because if there's some way he can pull off a trade for a guy that looks untradeable and in the process actually help the rebuild process instead of stunting its growth like you were talking about by giving up draft picks, you put the team in a much more ideal situation. The ownership is happier with that. The fan base is happier with that. And Rafael Stone gets full credit for that. So everybody's watching what he does here. If he somehow, some way is able to pull off this trade and doesn't have to give up a lot of assets in terms of draft picks, this could be a huge win for the Rockets and for Rafael Stone.